I was born into a family of antique dealers in Los Angeles. My father was French, my mother's American, and they were very, very well-known antique dealers specializing in world cultures from every corner of the world and every moment in time. And I was born and raised in this, and my crib, where I was put in the gallery so I wouldn't run around, was a early Romanesque baptismal font from, I don't know, the 4th or 5th century. And I've always been surrounded by art. However, I never wanted to be an antique dealer. I never wanted to deal in art. I went away and did my own life. I had a first career, which was in the military. And then I ended up by accident in my mother's business after my father died. She had opened a business to survive, let's put it that way. And I came into that business. She was selling what remained of the collection. And I got interested in tribal art and eliminated slowly everything but oceanic art. And I made a place for myself in the market. And then in 2010, after spending something like 20 years dealing in oceanic art, I moved towards one of my private passions, which was Eskimo art. And I brought my private collection into the business and began dealing in Eskimo art as of 2010. So that is how, in a nutshell, of course, all of this developed. And I joke often saying that I deal in the hot Pacific with oceanic, and the cold Pacific with at least the Alaskan and Siberian Eskimos. Then, of course, we move over to the Atlantic for Greenland. Both of these arts are arts of passion and not of intellectual analysis. You can, of course, analyze them and intellectualize them, but I react to these arts in a very instinctive manner. It's the heart that speaks, it's the body that relates to these things. There's something in there, in the way they were made, the essence of the artist that they put into it triggers something in my being and creates an enjoyment. I get a real pleasure out of being with these objects, dealing with them, studying them. There's something remarkably compelling about both oceanic and Eskimo art, which, yes, it exists in African art or pre-Columbian art or Northwest Coast. It exists in all art forms. But I just relate to those two, basically, although privately I collect in other fields as well. I think, first of all, that we must never forget that all of this art, all of the art of all of peoples is a universal wealth, it's a universal interest, and it's something that should be shared by all. When the first explorers from Europe moved out of Europe into the rest of the world at the end of the 15th century, for various reasons, which we can't go into here because it's way too developed and too complex, but we do know that the Western European culture is the first culture, globally, generalizing of course, to look at the rest of the world for their own reasons. A lot of it was mercantile or later in colonialism, and people were trying to conquer and whatever. But what is interesting, I find, in the approach of the Western world is that they were looking in some manner for an encompassing universal knowledge of their surroundings, and they went out to encounter the other, bring back information, bring back objects, for one of the main reasons being to better understand oneself through the understanding of what the other is doing or how he exists or she exists. And Western Europe, in its exploratory and conquering, we mustn't forget that, but in every culture, in every period of time, has always attempted to conquer. And let us not forget one essential thing. We're going off into space right now. And what do the scientists, what do the government, what do the academics tell us about going off into space? They say, we're going to conquer space. What are we going to do? We're going to terraform the planets up there. That sounds to me like what was going on in the 18th and 19th century when European countries were rushing off to take a country in Africa or take a country in the Oceania and colonize. And we're going up there and we're colonizing. So we are simply repeating the same kind of situation. It's a human what do you call it? What would it be? It's a human condition. And it is not necessarily a bad thing if it's done correctly, which unfortunately it always hurts somewhere along the line, because the one who gets conquered or who gets colonized loses out. But they were conquering before or colonizing before and maybe later. So it's always a cyclic situation. One of the most important things that I will insist upon is that Western European collecting of all of this art and all of this information, regardless of where, regardless of which cultures, regardless of when, has resulted in two main things. One of them is the universal appreciation of art by creating the first curiosity cabinets. The first dealers bought pieces from the first explorers, sold them to the first princes and princesses, and then to the bourgeoisie. And then people began to open up these curiosity cabinets to the public. And that became the foundation of our modern museums. And our modern museums then became the foundation for the dissemination of knowledge. And understanding, of course, and the aesthetics also are combined into this, because it's much nicer to study something that is beautiful or well done than something that is not. The two main things are the fact that art has become, through all of this, a universal wealth in every sense of the term, but also these source cultures from whom we took pieces, who we colonized, who in many cases we evangelized and changed their culture, modified their belief systems, brought them voluntarily or involuntarily into the 18th, 19th, and 21st century. We collected their knowledge, and today we have it, and we are making it back available to them, in the sense that their traditional cultures were not geared towards the retention and the accumulation of their own history. The histories were oral. We know that oral history gets changed over time through the recounting. Things get modified. Other cultures invented writing, and of course the Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Chinese, the Japanese. There's all types of writing, the Mayans, but we invented what we call books and what we call libraries, and although they existed in early Alexandrian and other times, we modified it. We created such a fantastic accumulation of knowledge, and we can now return it to these source cultures, use it ourselves, but give it back and let them learn about their own cultures in a peaceful and academic and sharing manner. So I think that the art market cannot be removed from the academic world. The aesthetic market in the museums cannot be removed from the art market, etc. All of it is intertwined and combined. There is no craft here. There is no art here. Everything is made for what I usually call it the ultimate critic, which is whoever they believe in up there or around there, whatever. All of this art is made to please the spirits, to function correctly, and things always function better when they're beautifully made. And there's a famous story about Marcel Dassault and his fighter jets. They made a fighter jet for him that had a stubby nose, and he said it won't fly. And they said, well, of course it'll fly. He said, no. And he drew a much sharper nose. And they said, well, we can't get a radar in there. He said, that's your problem. And so they invented this famous French radar that looks up and down, and they fitted into this very, very thin, long nose, and that's the Mirage fighter plane. And the Mirage fighter plane is this extremely elegant, long thing. Had it had a short nose, it wouldn't have been so beautiful. And he always said, a pilot will fly much better in a beautiful plane in which he has pride than something which is inelegant. And you look at the Coca-Cola bottle. You look at Pininfarina designed car. You look at all of these designed objects. Today we love design. We actually collect just design. All of this is designed. All of this is done on purpose with an aesthetic sense that is extraordinarily refined and worked. It's pushed up to the hilt of capacity. and of vision. So I don't like the separation of arts and crafts. Of course, there's a difference between aesthetic values and anthropological values. There is a scientific difference, but in our art world, there is a market difference, and people are, in general, more interested in the aesthetic sense than they are in the academic sense. Although once you have bought the thing for its beauty, you then go and try and figure out exactly what it's for. So you are actually